Genshin Impact. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this game. For everything it does right, there's also something it does wrong. I know some people are still kind of on the fence about whether or not they should try this game, and I've sunk a decent amount of hours into it, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my opinions on it. Whether or not it's definitively worth playing is up to you, but here are my thoughts on Genshin Impact. Let's go ahead and start with the story. It doesn't really give you a lot to go off of in the start, but what you do know is that you and your sibling are these travelers that like to go between worlds until suddenly you're interrupted by this mysterious person that separates the two of you and causes you to be stuck in this new land called Teyvat. Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah, that's probably fine. Anyway, you figure in order to find your sister and escape from this world, you have to find the 7 Archons. Each of them rule over one of 7 nations, and each represents an element, which is crucial to the combat system. I'll get into that a little bit later. And these Archons can bless specific people with these things called visions, which allow them to use one of the 7 elements. And so throughout your journey, you're going to be traveling across these lands and trying to recruit these people that have these visions in order to fight enemies and get to your eventual goal of finding the 7 Archon. I like the story so far. It tries to throw a few curveballs at you every now and then, and it's overall pretty enjoyable. I don't want to get too into it though for people that actually want to play through it. It's implied that there are going to be 7 nations to explore for these 7 Archons. However, in the months since the game's release, there have been a grand total of 2. And while this isn't an inherently bad thing because the devs are constantly working on the game, I'm just saying that if you were to get into Genshin Impact right now, it is going to be a very long time before the story wraps up. Overall, I like the story. It's nice so far. It mainly serves as a way to get us to interact with the characters and to kind of show us the characters. The playable characters are kind of the main focus of the game and its main selling point as well. Each one has their own little backstory and connections to the world and their own motivations. It's pretty cool to see through the main story and even the side stories how they interact with each other. All of this is to encourage you to get them through the gacha, which is probably my least favorite part of the game. And don't worry, there are things I do like about the game, I just want to get this out of the way. For the unfamiliar, gacha is something that a lot of mobile games use, and this being a mobile game hybrid kind of, I guess, falls into that category. So how gacha works is you spend a certain amount of the special currency in order to draw for a character. And this gives you a chance to get them along with some other things. I'm not a very big fan of gacha because it takes an extremely long time to get enough of this premium currency to use it. And the rates to get the 5-star characters, which are the rarest, are extremely low, like 0.6% low. Granted, eventually when you draw enough times, you will get a 5-star guaranteed. However, you're going to be reaching this pity rate most of the time because of the low rates. So the only reliable way to get this premium currency is to spend real world money. While I don't think this is inherently a bad thing, I just never really liked gacha, specifically because you can spend literally thousands of dollars trying to max out the characters you want. So if you are planning to get into this game, you're probably going to have to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to get a lot of the 5-star cast. Unless you're willing to spend hundreds of dollars, and I really don't recommend that. Fortunately, the game does hand you enough characters to get a pretty good team going, and eventually you are bound to get a few 5 stars. So you've got that going for you. You might want to get a character because they're really powerful or synergize well with your team, or for some other reason. And luckily, there are enough really good 4-star units in the game that you can build for a pretty powerful team, so you don't need to spend money on the gacha if you want to be able to progress through the game. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the core of Genshin Impact, the combat. There are a few different weapon types: swords, claymores, bows, magic, spears. Each character gets to use one of these along with an element type. Hitting an enemy with an elemental attack will inflict them with that element, which on its own doesn't do much. However, if it's hit by another element, it can cause an elemental reaction which can do a lot of damage. This is the heart of Genshin Impact. Being able to constantly combine elemental reactions in order to get the most damage quickly is basically what you're going to be trying to do the most. Because of this, you're going to find yourself constantly swapping between characters, and I kind of like this. It's a cool way to really make you use your entire team at once and feel like you're actually fighting as a team, even if only one person is on the field at a time. You can also build your characters to use them for different roles, such as one for damage, one for healing, and one for helping with elemental reactions. The bulk of your time in Genshin Impact isn't going to be spent on the story, but actually doing various challenges to try and bulk up your characters as much as possible. Your character's level, abilities, and weapons all have to be upgraded by special materials done by doing different challenges, most of which involve fighting a boss or a group of enemies. Granted, this is pretty fun for the most part, however, after a long time it starts to become monotonous, to the point where the game is basically telling you, oh, you want to increase your character's level cap? Alright, fight this boss 6 times in a row. A lot of time you'll be spending this game is just going to be grinding, which is really unfortunate because the stuff outside of grinding is actually a lot of fun. Another thing, when you're fighting bosses, in order to collect the materials after beating them, you have to use this material called resin, and this stuff replenishes itself over time. However, it means you can only fight a boss a certain number of times before you have to log off and wait a while. This is more or less the game's way of telling you to stop and go do something else. And it's also a way to kind of slow down your progression to make the game artificially longer. Now, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I don't hate the resin system. Sure, it's there to halt your progression and make it slower so you don't just grind it out like crazy all day, every day. However, I think it's nice because it gives you an opportunity to stop and go do something else besides just grinding. There's so many other things to do in the game, especially my favorite thing that this game has to offer, which is the exploration. Although there are only 2 areas so far, each one is absolutely massive, and there are a lot of hidden treasures and secrets. My favorite moments of this game were when I was just exploring completely directionless and happened to come across some really awesome secret or area or treasure. There are a few comparisons from this game to Breath of the Wild, and I think that's mainly due to the overworld. There are very few games out there that are able to give the sense of wonder and exploration that Breath of the Wild does, and I think Genshin Impact was able to capture a little bit of that in its overworld. So it's finally time to ask the question, should you play Genshin Impact? Well, if you're thinking about jumping into the game, I gotta give you a few suggestions first. First of all, try not to spend too much money on it. I know it's pretty tempting to jump in and just buy a ton of the premium currency to summon for your favorite characters, but you need to convince yourself that it's okay if you don't get every character you want. It's just a game after all. You can also buy this battle pass thing because literally every single modern game has to have one of these things, but I wouldn't get it unless you're absolutely sure you're going to complete it. It's perfectly fine to just stick with the free battle pass. And also, be sure to pace yourself. You're going to be tempted to try to blaze through the story, try to grind as much as possible to level up your characters as quickly as you can, and the game's going to try to convince you that you should log in every single day, but you don't have to. If you feel like you need to slow down, go ahead and do it. If you want to take a break from the game, go ahead and do it. You don't want to get fatigued and burn out too quickly. I was in a rush to progress through the game, and I got burned out and had to take a really long break from Genshin Impact. So, with all that in mind, those are my thoughts on Genshin Impact. If you want to give it a shot, go ahead. After all, it is free to play, so you don't have a lot to lose if you don't like it. And for those of you who have played already, I kind of want to hear what your thoughts on the game are. So leave a comment if you got anything to share. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more of my videos. See you in the next one.